Hey all! So today's project is getting rid of these 90s taillights and putting some vintage 70s ones in. So yeah, these are the 90s lights that the van came with. They're not horrible, but they very much let you know what era the van is from. So I have a set of these, which are a set of vintage 70s era lights, so I'm going to be installing them. This aluminum surround is separate and is not strictly speaking necessary. Some of the vans you'll find have them, some don't. But on a newer van, you'll see when I take this off, they didn't finish the edge where the taillight pocket welds to the quarter because it's covered by the light. So your options are to do that bodywork so that you don't need this trim surround, or you get this trim surround and it covers it up perfectly. I'm going to do something a little bit different with mine, which was a common trick back in the day. Instead of installing the light this way, the housing is going to stay the same. It's an aluminum piece. But the light is going to be installed in it sideways like this because it gives it just a little bit of a different look. That requires some very minor modifying of the housing to fit, but it actually makes fabbing it into the van easier, weirdly enough, and I'll show you why in a minute. So I pulled the light out, and I had to get these little things. This is what the screw goes through and gets grabbed into. It has two little tabs, one on each side, that you have to basically squeeze and force it back through and then kind of push it out. You need to get these out because you're going to have to open up these holes to make room for some of the screws on the back of the light. Installing this is literally just a matter of putting it in here and whacking it into place. It'll stay just from friction fit alone, and then once you have the light in, it can't come out. Obviously, if you're installing it stock, it goes in just like this. If you're installing it the way I am, sideways, there's two little ridges on either side in here that you just need to take off. I just use tin snips. There's so many ways. It's just thin aluminum to remove that, but you have to remove that so that the light is not entirely square. So when you rotate it, you need just you need the tiniest bit of clearance on either side, but it's easier to just take most of this lip off, so then you have a little bit of fudge room to adjust things. And then for the light itself, these four screws on the outside are what takes the lens off, because the factory light that was in here for the 90s, the bulb comes out from the inside, so the light fixture never gets removed from the van even to change a light. On this one, you take out the front face lens with these four screws, and then the bulbs are there, and that's how you change the bulbs. So these screws, you're going to need to basically open up more or less where these are. You'll see when you try and fit it. Installed stock, this screw hits this part of the opening, so you have to notch it here to clear the screw. When you install it this way, the way I am, these all clear this opening here. So that's just a difference depending on which way you're putting it in. So I'm going to do those things. I'm going to hog these out. I'm going to trim those, and I'm going to get this light to the point where it fits in the van, and then I will pick it up. I'm not going to film that because I'm going to be doing half it over there and half it over here. And there it is in. This is its final location, basically. So what I needed to do, like I said, this trim piece got a little bit trimmed off of each side just because the housing is ever so slightly unsquare. And then over here, these two just basically got hogged out bigger. These got hogged out and in this sort of plane so that all four screws are not hitting the body, so that this can go all the way back. You need this rubber gasket to hit this surface. It can look like it's in the right place when it's caught on this, but it's not going to actually seal super well that way. So you need to make sure it's going all the way in and this gasket is hitting this back surface. So the light will be just, this edge of the light will be just inside of the frame there. So now let's go on the inside and securely mount this and wire it up. Sorry you can't see all that much. It's kind of cramped in here, but make it as visible as possible. This is all the original van wiring. This is the wiring that came with the lights. Obviously, that's all going to have to get spliced, but fortunately, dark green to dark green, light green to light green, etc., etc., until you've got it all wired up. Not a hard thing to do. But as far as installing this goes, you can see there, that's one of those screws I had to make space for. The reason I just make a big hole is because it gives you a little bit of fudge room. This is going to need to be sealed, especially in the orientation I did it, but realistically either way, because the original earlier vans had a much thicker flange that came down, you know, basically where this, at least where this gasket is. No, actually it came out further because these were in it. So it just had a hole big enough to stick this through, more or less. So because this housing doesn't have to come out to change the bulbs, what you should do is on your last install, run a bead of like black RTV or other waterproof around the outside. Make it black so that it's not going to be visible, and then just install this, and that'll fill the gaps and make sure you're nice and watertight. The last thing you want to do is get water in. But these 4 nuts, and you know, these 4 studs and nuts are how it needs to be mounted. What a lot of people do is make up either a plate or straps and attach them to this, get this in the right place, and then weld them in. That's not a difficult way to do it. I even recommend it if you're in a situation not like me where you haven't put your interior yet. My problem is I've installed a ton of non-natural fibers all around this, so one spark could really, really ruin my day. But the thing is, that RTV is probably going to be enough to keep this light in place. I'm not going to depend on it entirely, but all that it has to do is basically keep the weight of the light from falling out. There's nothing fancy it has to accomplish. So what I'm going to do is make simple little sheet metal tabs with a hole in them and basically install them on these, and that'll be more than sufficient to keep it in place. It'll be easy to remove later if I need to, and it saves me all the hassle of trying to make this area safe to weld. So I have noticed a problem here that only applies if the light is in sideways, which is that this is actually slightly proud of this plane of this wall. So if you do what I do and bring this straight across, this just barely is in the way. Fortunately, it is just barely in the way, like it kind of clips the edge. So when I look carefully in here, the wire, before it even gets to the connector in there, is down a couple millimeters, and then there's a crimp fit that's further down before you get to anything immovable. So what I'm going to do is about halfway down the length of this, I'm going to very carefully grind this away with a Dremel until this little ring pops off, and that'll give you enough room to bend that either just the wire or the wire's crimp just a little bit, and then that'll clear it perfectly. It won't be a problem at all. This one's behind the plane of my wall, so this one's not a problem. All right, so that is in. It's siliconed in place, and then you can see the tabs I made. All they are is a bit of metal that was drilled, bent 90 degrees, and then hammered mostly flat again. That just allows it to have a little bit more tension than if it was a flat piece of metal would just immediately bend. This puts a little more tension in it, so it stays a little straighter. It's a little ugly to look at, but nobody's ever going to see it, so I'm perfectly happy with it, and it does exactly what I needed to do. I'm not risking the interior by trying to weld in here, so I'm going to call that good. All right, again, I'm sorry that the lighting is kind of terrible, but all the wiring is in and taken care of. I ended up reusing the connector from the van. I could have cut it up here and used the connector off of the old van, but I found out I had a piece of lamp cord attached to it, and I'm assuming went to trailer lights or something, so that didn't need to be in here. So anyway, this is all hooked in, this is all wired up. The this wiring harness and the lights that were on here presume a ground. These ground through the housing, so just to make sure, there's a common ground in here that I put a wire from there to the housing, just to make sure that it's all good. I trimmed this like I talked about so that it can lay off to the side so that it's not going to get pressured by the panel that's going to be on here, so that should be fine. The wiring to the side marker light, which has been disconnected for a while now, this side it's just the wiring off the old wiring harness, and then on the other side this had been ripped or cut off. It looks like it was damaged on the truck that these lights came out of, so I spliced in the one from the van, from this van, This is just temporary. Eventually the outside light fixture is going to be an LED because I need it to be flush against the wall right back here. So this is just to have something there that I can then cut later and wire the LED to. So that's all good. I've tested everything. It all works fine. So this can all get buttoned up back here now. And there we are. Done and in and polished and working. Very happy with it. The aluminum needs a little more work. I didn't realize it until I had it in that there's a little bit of paint on it. So this could use some more polishing. I'm going to come at it later with a little more aggressive stuff. But overall, they look really good. There's a little bit of paint on the lens that I couldn't get off. I have other lenses, so I may swap that out. But for right now, this is what I wanted to get done. I got it in, got them working. So now I have older style and customized taillights on the van, which I'm really happy about. So that basically helps dramatically to backdate the back of the van to get those more bulbous 90s ones off. Combine that with the pop-outs that I put in, and the back of the van has got a whole new look to it. So that's it for today. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.